Men rising up to end the silence around us about the chains that bind us, to dispel the darkness of illusion with luminous spiritual technologies, to finally become the hero within us all. Welcome to episode 42, right?
I
It's
think
42,
so.
Jay.
Yeah.
Episode 42 of Arise the Iceman's podcast. We have a very special guest with us, someone we've never had before, and I think Jai and Chris got connected because Chris heard Jai on Wisdom of the Sages, and they had some exchange, but I don't think they've met each other in person. Have you guys met
We
in person?
have once
Yeah.
at the Jagannath
Ah.
lecture this year.
Mhm.
Nice. Anyway, this is going to be this is a completely new subject matter. We're basically launching into a little health series, and Chris is kicking us off with breath is the greatest strength. So we're basically just gonna let Chris introduce himself and just tell us his story. Of what has gotten him to become an expert in this particular field, and his journey with Bhakti and everything. So we're basically just gonna. Jai, do you want to say something before Chris gets into it?
No, I think you hit all the major points. We're trying to do a health series. I think it kind of started a couple of weeks ago with Ayurveda, and now we're doing something here with breath. Next week we're gonna have a power lifter. And maybe some yoga and some pranayāma. So we're kind of doing a little health series. I mentioned this in my sharing of the blurb on Facebook, that when Uddhava asks Krishna what is strength, Krishna responds by saying pranayāma, which is like breath control, is the greatest strength. And that statement has like sat in my mind for years, since the beginning. Because just like you don't connect breath and strength in a typical Western upbringing. So it just like kind of didn't make sense. And as I became a little bit more familiar with pranayama as a exercise within the yoga tradition, I was like, okay, there's something to this that's very kind of profound. But Bhakti doesn't exactly speak to the necessities of those sorts of yogic practices. So it's not something that I personally pursued. But then this Wim Hof, who's also famously known as the Iceman, kind of blew up in the last 4 or 5 years, right? Something like that, last 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
And it's like traveling the world, and he's super popular because of the amazing feats that he's been able to accomplish with his breathing technique. I think he's broken, like, I was watching some some videos and hearing some podcasts all this morning, actually. And I think they say he's broken like 26 world records with his breathing stuff, and like all sorts of wild stuff, definitely demonstrating this idea that breath is strength. So yeah, I wanted to get into that, like kind of demystify that a little bit.
We can do that.
Yeah. And also because health is such a big subject right now in the world psyche. And we're not going to get into that too much, but what is like the wise health decisions? So I'm curious, because I think you're starting a business which you're calling Sovereign Souls, right?
That's correct. Yeah.
And this word sovereignty has been like an important one to me in terms of like the male journey into completion, let's say. And so I've been kind of interested, like the sort of health choices that make you autonomous are like the best ones, and not the ones that make you dependent, on this and that every 2 months. Anyway, not going there. So yeah, this is kind of my inspiration for inviting you on for this particular episode. So yeah, let's start with your journey. Let's definitely start there. But I wanted to share that there's a lot going on in my head when I invited you at this particular time. There's a lot going on there.
This is a perfect time thank you so much for inviting me. I'm so happy to be here with you guys and to be able to, have a little bit of a platform to talk about this, because this is a really, really important time, particularly to understand the breath, because the breath can lead to so much autonomy. If we look at our physiology, a lot of it is automated. We don't control our heartbeat. We don't control our digestion directly. But the breath is something that we can control, but it's also autonomic. So it can act as our key into the rest of the physiology. So as you introduced me, my name is Christopher Villanella. I'm originally from New
That's
York.
such a cool last name, by the way.
East Coast Italian. Yeah, I'm originally from New York, but I currently live in Portland, Oregon. And so I practice and teach a system of breathing, cold exposure, and mindset, which you touched on, called the Wim Hof Method. I also teach and practice another system that teaches the nature of functional breathing, and that's called the oxygen advantage. The Wim Hof Method, it allows us to regulate our mood through influencing the hormonal system, to boost our health by influencing the immune system, and improve our strength and fitness through influencing how the cells produce energy, as well as much, much more. The oxygen advantage really teaches us how to breathe properly just throughout our waking and sleeping, and that improves quality of life all around. So I found the people that I work with using the Wim Hof Method have success in 3 major categories. There's often a lot of trauma release and dealing with depression. People find relief from autoimmune conditions, and these are often conditions that medication can't help or can only help for so long. You know, Wim Hof's popular enough right now that if you're kind of frustrated and the typical medical models have not given you relief, and you type in the computer, you know, rheumatoid arthritis, what do I do? Wim Hof will pop up if it's helping people with that. And there's also tremendous amount of studies. So the Wim Hof Method really started with him going the route that you mentioned, setting 26 world records. And, you know, it's not all about breath in those records. He used the breath to achieve to connection, to be able to control the body with the mind, and was able to do these wild things. But later, and more recently, went through science. So there's something like a dozen studies that have been done, and each one confirmed these things he had said in the past that almost sounded like wild claims, even to me. I mean, I love this guy, and I got to train with him and meet him, and you know, we'd be doing breathing, and he would be saying stuff like, we're getting into your brainstem. That didn't bother me. I didn't think he was like lying or trying to convince me of something, but I thought he was just, it was hyperbole, you know? Because I got into this before the science was really, really picking up. There was a couple studies done already. And it turns out, no, we are actually getting into the brainstem. You can see it on a brain scan. We're getting into the DNA. It's true. I definitely didn't think that one was true. It's affecting the telomeres. So I'm newer to working with the oxygen advantage system, but I found it to work really well with helping with people with many respiratory issues, from sleep apnea and general snoring to asthma. You know, people with asthma are finding they're getting off of like 50% of all their medications in 3 months of doing this oxygen advantage. And both of these things are really simple. So my story feels long and winding, but really when I was thinking about it to talk to you guys about it, it kind of reads like a straight line putting me right where I am today.
Sure.
As a kid, I found that conventional wisdom and institutions pointed me in the wrong direction from day one. And I found myself skeptical of them from an early age. So, you know, like right from when I was born, doctors convinced my mother that bottle feeding was superior to breastfeeding. Well, when you bottle feed a baby, the chances of them mouth breathing are much, much higher. And mouth breathing leads to poor development of the airways and being more prone to mouth breathe in the future. When you're breathing through the mouth all the time, your chemistry is off. If your chemistry is off, your mood is off. Your breathing's not right, so the body and the mind aren't right. And this led to being maybe around 6 or 7, where doctors said, hey, this kid doesn't breathe right. He probably has asthma. He needs surgeries. And so they removed my tonsils and my adenoids as a kid. And there was never any talk of breathing. How is this person breathing? What's the pattern? What's the problem? They removed those things, and then my breathing was even worse, probably because it was damaged, the body was inflamed. And then I had typical, you know, poor diet. And as a child and a young man, I was sick all the time. All the time. You know, humans are so adaptable. I just kind of got used to it. And then in school, you know, this is not a completely atypical story. I just didn't really fit in. I wasn't really like the other kids. And so the solution there was medication. I had teachers and counselors trying to medicate me with antidepressants or things to calm me down. I wasn't particularly hyper, and I wasn't particularly depressed. I just saw a world that I didn't really fit into and was trying to find my way in it. So luckily, I already had a mistrust of these sort of institutions, and I rejected those medications. And that was quite a fight. But I'm glad.
A fight with whom, like your parents, or?
It felt like everybody, every authority figure in my world, parents, teachers, counselors. And that I'm glad I did, because a lot of my friends didn't, and they succumbed to that sort of pressure. And, you know, I'm 36 now, so I've had time to see the outcomes. It often wasn't so good. You know, people's mental health suffered, people's physical health suffered from getting on medication as teenagers. So I left school at 16 years old. I wanted out. I didn't think they had anything to teach me. I thought about it. It wasn't just a pure rejection. It was, I saw what I was being taught, and I just didn't buy it. And I knew that there was more out there. And so I went to seek it myself. And I'd already kind of found that punk rock was speaking my language, and I kind of immersed myself in the punk scene of the Lower East Side. And that felt very good, because when I felt like I was all alone seeing a world that didn't make sense, and I had other people around me, some camaraderie in that, okay, you guys get what I'm saying. So it offered me that. I knew I wasn't crazy anymore, because sometimes I was kind of wondering. But the type of punk I got into, it didn't offer me much more than that, because it was very nihilistic. You know, it kind of, we pointed out the problem, but we didn't have a solution. And as I've mentioned to you both, that put me in Tompkins Square Park. That was like the heart of Lower East Side punk rock. It's funny, when I've heard some people kind of from a generation above me's stories with it. I heard Bhakta Louis talking on Wisdom of the Sages about how he ended up in that park, you know, probably 20 years before me. And I resonated with that so much, because no one told me. The internet wasn't even a thing yet, really. And no one told me that this is the spot. I just remember hanging around the West Village, because that's where the weirdos were at, and walking down 8th St. Mark's, you know, and it just like a magnet just sucked me into that park, you know. I didn't know any punk rock or hardcore history or Hare Krishna history or anything like that. It's just that's where I got pulled. So I came of age staring at Prabhupada's tree, and feeling a pull there too, but being scarred from, you know, kind of authority systems, and spirituality looked like that to me. So I never really associated, but I was always peeking over those benches to see what the Krishnas were up to when they were around. So eventually I left New York City, and I was actually riding freight trains, because I couldn't find what I wanted in school or my home. I couldn't find it in the punk rock scene. And so I went out looking broader, and I didn't have any money. So the option was freight trains. And I rode freight trains for many years, actually. And now that I know a little bit more about Vedic culture, I was like, oh, that was kind of like a sadhu archetype. You know, I didn't stay anywhere for very long.
Chris, how exactly would you go about that? Would you just jump them? Like, how does that work?
Yeah, now it's probably different now, because the internet's changed everything. But back then, I had one friend, or more like an association, a guy I knew, and I knew he did that. And he was this grizzled guy with tattoos on his face, and I went up to him and I said, I got to get out of here. How do you do that? And he drew me a map of a train yard in Philadelphia on a napkin. And that was my starting point that I had. And I took a Chinatown bus to Philadelphia and waited in that train yard. And it took a bit of courage. You know, it was a big leap into the unknown. But I snuck onto a Tropicana orange juice train. And 27 hours later, I was in Jacksonville, Florida. But the feeling was amazing. The feeling was amazing. And I lived like that, like didn't stay anywhere for too long, didn't use money very much, more than I needed to, didn't really have an option. But I found so much grace in that lifestyle, so much grace, because wherever I was taken care of. And I thought about a lot of my friends back home that were kind of in these systems that I was trying to get away from. And I think a lot of them being there was, that's what you're supposed to do. And they were there because of fear, you know, fear of what happens if you go outside of that. And I took that leap of courage and found that I was always taken care of. I was always connected. There was food when I needed food. There was always some job when I needed a job. I think the seeds of spirituality were really first being watered for me there in that lifestyle. I kept me there maybe longer than I needed to be there. I was doing that for like 7 years, and
Wow.
probably could have slowed down a little earlier. And so doing that also and not having a lot of money, it put me in a lot of Krsna temples because I was looking for food, and you guys had prasad. And so I was eating a lot of prasad. But every time someone ever came up to me and said, "Oh, do you want to come for this?" No. "Oh, we're having a no. And I completely I put my foot down. I'm here for food, and that's it. And everyone was okay with that. I should have taken that maybe as a sign right there that these are all right people. So, flash forward, I settled down in California when I was about 29 in the Bay Area, and I had a baby with my partner that I've been with for a while. And having this baby in my life made me start reflecting on my vast shortcomings, thinking, okay, how do I shore some stuff up? There's a lot of generational trauma in my family, and I didn't want to perpetuate that. I saw this golden opportunity where I could be a catalyst to change these things. And so thinking about that stuff, I realized that I'd been in survival mode for so long. I was so good at that. I mean, New York City in the late 90s and early 2000s was still pretty crazy, and but being in survival mode all the time, it blocked me from the heart. I believe I built a wall around that heart when I was a kid just to protect myself, and I didn't know how to get in now. And having a kid, you feel the stirrings there in the heart, but I realized I needed to get more in touch with it. And to be honest, I didn't even realize that there was a wall at that time, but I knew there was a disconnect. So I'd always been really interested in people doing seemingly impossible things. So I was reading books about ultra runners and people who survived crazy disasters, shipwrecks and plane crashes and yogis. And through that interest, I came across this guy, Wim Hof. And like your research recently, Jay, I found these world records, and that's what first kind of drew me in. Wow, how does this guy, now Wim's an amazing guy. At 50 years old, he climbs Mount Everest in just shorts and no shirt, How do you do that? To put that in perspective for myself, I looked up what it usually takes to climb Mount Everest. And guys in the prime of their lives, athletic peaks, are going up there with support and $7,000 outfits on, And this guy just went up there. So it got me interested, but I quickly realized that it wasn't the records that interested me. It was the possibility. And that's what always interested me about these sort of books about people doing seemingly impossible things. If this person can do it, what does that mean for me? We're both human. It changes the barrier of what's possible in my own mind. So I looked into Wim and I found a tutorial. This is before he was as big as he is now. There wasn't a lot of information out there. And I found a tutorial on how to do the breathing, and I tried it. And in my first session there, I felt a level of deep meditation I never found before. By this point, I tried many different types of meditation. I'd read a lot of philosophy and things like that through my travels. And it fascinated me, but I never fell into it. I never felt like it was happening for me. And in this one breathing session, I felt joy and peace and transcendence. And I went back again and again to it. And early on in one of these first, sessions of my first couple months doing it, I heard these questions bubble up for me. It was somewhere between, it was almost like actually hearing a voice, something between hearing a voice and seeing a vision. I can't quite describe it, but the questions were very fundamental. Who are you? Who are you really? Not who you say you are, not who you think you are. Who are you really beyond these narratives? And what are you doing here? What's your purpose?
So these questions were popping up for you after you started these breathing exercises, but before you actually started to train with Wim Hof. I'm just trying to keep the timeline clear. Okay.
Yeah.
I find that very interesting. This morning on my social media, I just shared this quote that I really was appreciating. And the quote said that you don't think yourself into a new way of living. You live yourself into a new way of thinking.
A new way of thinking.
Was that the quote? Dude, I used to have raw memory. Now my memory is
No, but that
getting
makes
older.
sense. That makes sense.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah, we
I
don't
get
think
that.
ourselves into a new way of living. We live ourselves into a new way of thinking. And just this breathing thing and how that is leading to these questions coming up seems like an example of what this quote is alluding to. Anyway, just
Well,
interesting. I'm keeping the timeline in my head.
We live in this frontal cortex, you know, we're schooled just to be here, not to be anywhere else. And you can even see it again on brain scans. You get 25% more activity, 25% more blood flow here because it's just dominating, you know. And there's the rest of the brain has a job. The heart has a job. More signals actually go from the heart to the brain than the brain to the heart. So yeah, I was feeling it, which is you can't think your way into a lot of or out of a lot of these things. You have to feel it.
Right.
As those questions came up, I brought them to the wisest friend I had at the time, who was an acupuncturist. And she sent me to her friend. She said, sit down with this guy. I think he knows. He's something called a Jyotish. I didn't know what that was, you know. I sat down with him and he did my chart, but as he heard why I was coming to him, he said, hey, man, I'm looking at your chart. Just read this. And he gave me a Gita. And that made me laugh because you know how many times people have tried to hand me that book before.
Chris, you're not letting you get away from it. Take this Gita, bro.
Yeah. And as I started reading it, the first thing that struck me was like, yeah, I mean, it answered these very, very foundational questions I had. And if these guys knew how to answer this question through spans of thousands of years of time, and that answer is still completely intact, and that question is still the same question, it gave me a clue that, okay, I have some trust in this. You know, they understand the human spirit enough for this question, this answer to still be relevant. So I was studying the Gita and studying to become a Wim Hof instructor at the same time. And together they create a very transformative atmosphere for me.
Wait, so when these questions come up, because you're saying you studied the Gita and Wim Hof at the same time. So when did you go for training with Wim Hof or for this Wim Hof technique?
Nearly immediately. Like, I mean, within the first part of the training, and they might have changed it by now. You know, I'm thinking that maybe the second or third wave of teachers that came out of the Wim Hof method. And the first wave was just, you were most likely Dutch and you hung out with Wim Hof and did lots of crazy things and you became a teacher. It sounded like a lot of fun. By my wave, like the second or third, I think I would be in, we had like a little manual and we did some actual training that was thought out. Now I think it's even more.
Who was conducting the training?
Wim and the way I think Wim would have been not known right now if it wasn't for his kids, really.
Yeah, I heard his eldest son specifically had like a real business savvy, and
he does.
Because
yeah.
of that, he got popular and kind of spread around.
Yeah, because Wim was trying to do it just through these world records and stuff, and it might have been his idea to do it through science, but he's got 5 children now, 4 adult children, and 1 3-year-old, and so he the kids kind of came around him and they formed the company and they helped really focus this through science. And so his kids had a large part to do with running the academy, the Inner Fire Academy, where we train. And 2 of the earliest instructors were in doing the day in and day out stuff of the training. And then Wim pops in every day, or I don't know how they do it now. And yeah, it just speaks from the heart. And he's a really motivational guy. Like being around him, you feel like extremely powerful. You know,
I want to ask about that, because one thing you said earlier about it wasn't the world records that attracted you, but it was the possibility. And that made me think, like personally, that's how I kind of view the mystics of any tradition. I see the mystics as representing the possibility that's available for all living beings. You know, maybe very few actually achieve that possibility, but they represent the possibility within consciousness that all can achieve. And you're kind of working with a mystic of sorts in this sense. And how was that experience for you? This is like pre-Krishna consciousness, but you're reading the Gita. And you're kind of
Mhm.
working with a mystic. I'm kind of just a little interested in that. Not like super details, but just your experience of working with like a real mystic of sorts.
Yeah, again, it's a feeling. It's I
Hmm.
think Wim's really clever. He's very, very, very intelligent. I mean, the man speaks 12 languages. He can rattle off slokas all day. And he was reading
Whoa.
the children Gita and Bhagavatam as bedtime stories when they were a kid. But part of his intelligence is he doesn't talk about that in the past because he believed he would be discredited right away. So he used science. Now, as you know, we have 5 years of science validating almost everything he said, everything actually to date, pretty much. And now I hear him starting to talk a little bit more about that aspect, you know.
Hmm.
But what he brought was he found that he was looking for the mystic and couldn't really find it. Found a lot of people that I think he found to be charlatans, and so he found that the cold, that was the mystic. You know, that brought you right into nature, right into your own mysticism, in touch with your own spirit. And I found that being around him, being around a person like that, it's simply that energy. It's like you can't not be infected with it. You know, it's really, really powerful. We climbed a mountain in Poland in late November wearing just shorts. And granted, you know, we've used these sort of exercises. We use the cold training. We use the breathing to tune up our vascular system and our hormonal system. So we're running, you know, at the physiologically in peak condition. But we went up that mountain and it wasn't any tough guy stuff. It wasn't like we just survived it. It was like a walk in the park. It felt good. It felt better than a walk in the park on a spring day. We were warm the whole time.
Dude, that's mind blowing, dude.
It is.
But how much like conscious intentional effort did you have to consistently be investing in your breathing to be able to maintain that level of comfort, or does the breathing just become like automatic?
Yeah, that's a good question. We don't use the breathing for that sort of mountain climb. There is a full, I mean, in the moment beforehand, it primes the system, and it actually changes some proteins in the blood that relate to how we experience pain. So you don't feel maybe the sting of things quite as much. I think what's also happening there is that the breathing makes your body very alkaline. And in an alkaline body, the nervous system can communicate better. And so you have a better mind-body connection. So focus is required the entire time up that mountain. We're not talking about stuff. We're not joking around. I think Wim played a really good trick on us in that trip, where the plan was to go to the top of this mountain, a few hours hike, and then we were going to put our clothes back on and come down. And we went up so easily, at that point easier than any group had gone up before, that at the top, I think he decided to give us like a little extra credit challenge. So the whole way up, we're very focused. We're not chatting unnecessarily. We're just thinking about what we're doing. And when we get up there, he said, "Hey, does everyone want to take pictures with me?" Which everyone always does, you know. So now everyone's laughing and taking pictures, and you feel the cold creeping in a little bit because you're not focused. And then he let people start putting their clothes back on. He was like, "Pack the clothes up. We're going down, no clothes." And I felt this very, very palpable moment in me where a little fear set in, and I felt the cold set in, and I had to grab the reins on my mind and my body again and really wrestle it a little bit. And then once I got back into focus, I was warm again, no problem.
Oh
Wow.
man.
It sounds, yeah.
Yeah, like unprecedented. Chris, like you having this moment of reining yourself in, rebooting your focus. What is the actual thing that you do? Like what exactly are you focusing on? Because you're saying like you were sort of priming the body with breathing before you started the ascent.
Mm-hmm.
So then at the top you like lose focus, cold. So then what do you actually do? Is it a breathing technique again, or like what is that focus?
No, it's not. It can't really be intellectualized. The best I can say for that is it's like a very subtle conversation that's happening between the mind and the body. And maybe the spirit starts the conversation and says, okay, we can do this. You know, you feel that cold coming in. Don't give way to fear. It's like, have you ever had you're about to sneeze and you fight the sneeze off? You know, it's very subtle where you're just going, hey, it's okay. It's okay. We're calm. And it happens. You know, it's something really, really subtle, but it's a conversation is the best way you can be described.
I think you did a good job. It's just so hard to conceive because we're so disconnected from the mind and so disconnected from the body that even the thought of that level of mind control doesn't strike most people as a possibility whatsoever.
Right.
And so when you're trying to describe it, we're just like, yeah, okay.
It's belief too. You know, it's like, okay, I can think about my hand becoming warm and my hand will become warm. Now, is that something because I trained the vascular system? Yeah, a little bit, but also I've become so familiar through doing this process a lot, through this conversation into the mind and the body. Right. Everyone can do this stuff. And that's what's really nice about Wim's message. You know, this seems like a miracle to some degree to be able to fight off something like E. coli. But it's not a miracle. It's just that we are become so disconnected. The bar for miracles has actually become quite low. You know, being strong and being happy and being healthy, it shouldn't be a miracle. That's the way we were born.
Chris, something that I'm appreciating about you right now is that you have this energy. You seem like profoundly present. You're just like really present. And I'm wondering, after having gone through this training with Wim and then starting this practice as a kind of a full-time thing in your life and having done that now for some time, how long has it been? Like 7 years?
So almost 7, yeah, just about.
Okay, 7. So like now, having reached the point where you are right now in your life, like tell us about your lifestyle. You know, what do you do? What don't you do? What are your regular practices? Like how has this transformed you into what you do on the daily?
Well, I was always kind of regimented in my daily life. This provides a really, really good anchor. So I wake up, you know, just before the sun comes up. I try and go outside and get some air on me right away, drink a glass of water, shake my body out a little bit. And then I go right to my mat. I like to do my breathing in front of my altar, laying down, where I also do puja, stuff like that. So yeah, I go through 3 or 4 rounds of breathing, and it's like a little exercise in transcendence every day for me. You know, I've got it down because I'm always paying attention and tweaking my breathing to where every single time it's a psychedelic experience for me. Like my consciousness and my body separate a bit. And I think that's a good practice for me personally to look at the body in that way and go, oh, I see you down there, you know, and go somewhere else and leave this reality a little bit. And yeah, after that, I do my japa. And then I usually go outside and jump in the ice bath. And that's having that morning routine. It sets my tone for the entire rest of the day.
So when you do ice bath every day?
Most days, yeah, almost every day.
How long?
You know, how long for me or how long is recommended?
No, how long for you?
For me, I don't really time it. I mean, it's that subtle conversation again. You know, it's well, first of all, there's extenuating factors. Is the water at 35 degrees or is it at 42 degrees? It's not really a time thing. I feel the body. I feel the body yelling at me sometimes, you know, get out. And once I have that conversation with it, oh, okay, I see this desire and aversion there, right? I see the want to leave. And I don't need to listen to that. You know, I can be separate from that. And once I find calmness in my actual, you know, breathing, because it will take your breath away a little bit for a few seconds, and just get to observe it all. This is kind of the pathway to becoming, for me, the pilot of the body, and not merely the passenger getting led around. So the the transfer to the spiritual practice, it's like they just dovetail so perfectly.
Yeah, I have a god sister who does an hour of pranayāma before she chants japa. And she says the japa that she does after pranayāma is just like, she's just like dead focus and alive and like practically floating.
Yeah,
I can only imagine. I can literally only imagine. Okay, so Chris, then you get out. Okay, but approximately how long? Like how long, more or less?
It depends on what I'm doing. The minimum effective dose, like 2 minutes.
Okay.
But some days, let's say I feel some stagnation in my life, or I feel some stress working on me, and let's say I feel the mind controlling me rather than me controlling the mind and the body, then I might work up to, now I'm not going to jump in for 20 minutes all at once necessarily, but let's say I'll do 5 minutes one day and 10 minutes the next day and 15 minutes the next day and work up to 20 minutes.
This is now totally around. Sorry, Carrie, continue.
The big difference, though, there's a humongous difference between being in this deep freezer I've converted into an ice bath in my backyard and being out in nature. So the last couple winters since I've lived in Oregon, my son is just about to be 7, and we would go up every weekend to Mount Hood, which is not so far from our house, and we would do some sledding, except for I wasn't wearing any clothes but my shorts. And that was an experiment. Kind of like on the mountain with Wim, I felt nothing but ease. I thought, now I'm very cognizant because I have a child with me that I have to pay attention to. I can't be completely focused on myself. So I made sure the car was close and I could like get changed if I needed to. And I expected almost that, oh, maybe I'll be out here for 30 minutes and then I'll go do that, But something about just being in the moment with the kid, and what we were sledding, throwing snowballs at each other, playing around for hours. And I felt no coldness. I'm not being a tough guy. If I felt coldness creep in, then the experiment's done. Okay, that's how far I could go. But yeah, I just felt good.
Is there ever just like a shower on the menu for you? Like, I'm just gonna take, a shower, or is it just like
100%? Yeah, 100%. In the winters, especially with the water's colder here, I'll maybe just use the shower so I don't have to get a towel and do all that stuff. But I just know what I need for a dose to feel like I'm getting connected, and that's, for me, that's primarily what it's about. Now the side effect is, heart disease, #1 killer in the world. When you get in cold,
you mean
water,
more than COVID? Okay, just scratch that. I'm just being a little bit. I'm being petty. This
by a million points. I mean, I can give you some ammo for that stuff too. But, yeah, but by so much. And when you get in cold water, we have about 66,000 to 80,000 miles in our vascular system. We don't exercise it. And that's, I guess, what I really want to get forth to you guys and any listeners about the Wim Hof Method. It's simply a stimulus. Nature is designed to be balanced and regulated. And we've moved so far away from nature and so much into comfort. And it's not that comfort is a bad thing in and of itself, but it means that we removed a lot of the stimuluses that we were adapted to be with and evolved to be with. And one of those stimuluses is cold. So when you're cold, your vascular system has that 66,000 to 80,000 miles. To put that in perspective, it could wrap around the globe 2.5, 3 times. The tiny muscles around it contract when it's cold and expand when they're warm. And our vascular system just doesn't know how to do that anymore, because when we're cold, naturally you put on a jacket, you turn on the heat. When you're warm, you put on the air conditioner. And so just by virtue of introducing a little bit of cold on the physiological side of things, we're tuning up the entire vascular system. And that could very realistically, a 2-minute cold shower every day could reduce heart disease by, who knows, untold number.
Wow.
Yeah.
I used to hear, when I joined the ashram, cold showers was like you weren't a brahmachari unless you did cold showers.
Yeah.
So I remember the first 2 years, I was like extremely rigid about taking cold showers because that's the standard. Then I got super sick one year and I connected it to the cold shower. So it's been an off and on love affair since then. I have my periods where I'm into it, But I remember seeing like all these in the bathroom in our monastery. One of the sannyasis had put like a list of the benefits of cold showers, and they just didn't sound super compelling. Like I just remember reading it and not feeling compelled to like take it just because of that, you know. Maybe if I had heard you're gonna reduce heart disease, I'm like, oh snap, for real. It would
I
be
mean, there's
more
a lot.
interesting.
There's a lot more to it than
Right.
that. So cold, you got to keep in mind that it's a stressor. So we
Right.
use it, you know, as a stressor to elicit strength, like weightlifting. You know, weightlifting is not good for you in and of itself. It's slightly damaging. But if you do the right amount, the right weight, the right reps and sets, you're damaging the body just so slightly to elicit it to come back stronger. That's a biological concept called hormesis. And the cold's the same. So the cold's all good for keeping you strong and making you feel good. If you're under the weather or you feel like something might be getting you, then it might be time to back off.
Right. So how did you're super duper articulate, like the way you're articulating this with the science, and it's compelling. Like I would be very compelled. And I'm curious, not curious, I want to hear your story of how you got into like teaching this, because now you've been teaching this, holding workshops, and I want to hear about that relationship with your students and the impact that's had on you teaching it and on them receiving this sort of training and how it's transformed their lives also.
Yeah, I would love to tell you about that. I feel like I'm not articulate. I feel like I'm a little bit all over the place because there's so much I want to tell you guys about it. But thanks. Yeah, pen me in with the questions. That makes it easier. For teaching, I became a teacher for myself, not for other people. I just wanted to go deeper. I wanted to see what this is about. And that's the way I am when I'm interested in something. I want to go all the way. Especially that was my mode before I had a child and was living a family life, because I had that freedom to go all in on whatever I was doing. And it was so fun and it made me feel so good that I used to hold like sliding scale workshops at my house in California. And I'd have people come over and we'd all have a good time. But I wasn't too serious about it. And I'd done a lot of those. But in the beginning of the pandemic, and I kind of stepped back and said, what's going on here? I see the primary thing I see is a lot of fear and a lot of things that are not good for the immune system: division, isolation, and fear. And in one of my breathing sessions, so even earlier when I said I heard the voice in my breathing session, when I do a few rounds of breathing, right? What the Wim Hof Method breathing is 3 or 4 rounds of 30 to 40 breaths, followed by a long retention time where we have no breathing, and then a recovery breath. When I'm done with all those rounds, I'm in a completely different mindset. And that's when lots of ideas or pictures come in my mind, or, you know, I hear voices, so to speak. And during one of those breathing sessions, I had the Gita flashed in my mind of do your duty, right? Like there's a big call to action there. Do your duty. And what is your duty? Your duty is what is in front of you to do, you know? Ask that question, what's yours to do? And I was sitting there frustrated about this fear and division. And I knew I had a tool that could help bring people together and empower people, a tool that fit perfectly. You know, I'm pretty careful not to be like, I'm a hammer and everything's a nail, but this fits so perfectly. One of the things that put the Wim Hof method on the map scientifically was the E. coli study. That was one of the first big things that people took notice of. So women saying, I can control my immune system, and you can too. Anyone can. And so they set up a study where they injected him with endotoxin E. coli at a place that studied the response of the immune system to E. coli. And Wim Hof didn't get sick. But they said, oh, well, you're this special guy. You're the Iceman. You're an outlier. Of course, science is supposed to do that. So he said, no. Anyone can do this. And he set up another study, double blind. And he trained these people for, I think the scientists thought, oh, you're going to need like, what, 6 months or a year? He said, 1 week. Give me 1 week. And he only trained these volunteers, random volunteers, for actually 4 days in person, just doing the basic breathing and cold showers that we do. And they had 100% score. No one got sick.
Dang, I saw that in the documentary I was watching.
So this made a big splash because it was undeniable. Something's happening here. It was the first evidence that we've had that the immune system can be influenced and potentially controlled by our own willpower. And what was going on there, to put it really, really simply, without getting too much into the science, is through these proteins in the blood called interleukins, it downregulated the interleukins that signal inflammation, and it upregulated the ones that fight inflammation. And so if we translate that to COVID, it's actually some of the same interleukins, interleukin 6, 11, and 1, I believe. What's primarily hurting people in COVID situations, it's not COVID itself, it's the catastrophic inflammation that results from COVID. So here we have a scientifically proven way to reduce inflammation. Now, I'm not saying this is a cure. I'm saying that this is something that absolutely merits more investigation and research. And so that was what was my impetus to teach, was that I knew that this could actually really help. There's also, as I mentioned earlier, the body becomes very alkaline when you do this. And that is because of the chemistry change. We're blowing off a lot of CO2 when we're doing this deep sort of breathing. And CO2 is responsible for keeping the pH in balance. So we can bring the alkalinity up. There's a lot of research back in the 30s. This guy, Dr. Otto Warburg, won the Nobel Prize actually in 1932 for linking alkalinity in the body to destroying cancer cells, also bacteria and virus cells. So my research showed me, just peripheral research, because when you bring up alkalinity, it sounds a little hokey. And I was trying to look and see what that was about. And it seems to me like in the 80s and 90s, a bunch of people tried to come on board and sell people like apple cider vinegars and stuff like that, saying that this will make your body alkaline, thus you'll be healthy. But you can't easily make the body's pH is very narrow. You can't change it through diet very much, but we can temporarily change it through the blood. And it seems as though the body's highly alkaline, it will destroy the DNA of bacteria and viruses. And now I'm someone who was sick constantly from the kind of way I lived my early life.
Right.
Later, I did martial arts and I would compete. I was sick so often I would compete sick, because if I didn't, it was like I just never would have competed. So to date, I mean, knock on wood, but it's been almost 7 years, and I've only had one cold in 7 years of doing this. Not even sort of a cold. That's not to say I haven't felt run down. Maybe a couple of times I felt run down. I do my practices and I felt better. And the one time I did get a cold, it was early on in my practice, and I really brought it on myself.
Chris, how old are you now, if I might ask?
36.
Okay.
Wait. I want to hear about your students now. So you're
sorry, long-winded.
No, it's okay. Yeah, it's important to hear how this has impacted you. It's a compelling story in itself. And so I like how you describe duty. What's in front of you to do? Because I definitely feel like the younger generation, like my generation and down, we're always like, what's my duty? What's my duty? And we're like forever floating in mental land until we die. So you're like, what's in front of you to do? And so you figured out that I'm gonna teach this, and people started joining. And I want to hear about the impact that's been on their lives as reported to you from them.
Yeah, sure. That yes, what's in front of me to do, it felt really, really important. I didn't want to do this. I don't like being in front of groups of people, honestly, and so it took a lot for me, but I felt like it was a responsibility. And so I set up some online workshops at first, trying to feel it out. So I was doing some Zoom workshops where I would just do a slideshow and explain all the science and try to make it very compelling, not too heady, but just to give the intellect. I try to split my workshops into two parts. The first part is speaking to the intellect and making you understand, I want to do this, and trust it. And then we go into the experiential, the breathing, and in person, we do the cold. So I was doing online workshops, like one a week, and they were filling up mostly just by word of mouth, which I thought, okay, this is a good sign. A lot of people were sending their family, someone would do it, their brother and their mom would show up the next time. And that gave me some good encouragement, like, okay, this is giving people some value. And I was getting messages about, man, that was the first time in this long I haven't, went a day without getting a headache. Or God, one of the most impactful ones was a girl who had rheumatoid arthritis, childhood rheumatoid arthritis, which I didn't even know was. And was 30, I believe, early 30s. And when we did our workshop, and she wrote me the next day and said that was the first time that I haven't had pain without medication in as long as I can remember, since I was a child.
Dang.
And it's really nice having a little bit of bhakti behind me and being able to make sure that it's like my ego's not going anywhere with this. Like, I understand that I'm just in a position, I've been put in a position, given the tools to pass this on to other people. I didn't make up any of this stuff, So then I started doing bigger workshops. I'm trying to remember the first couple I did. It all just was put in front of me. Someone would call me up and say, for some reason I ended up, I guess I'm just a traveler by nature. I don't know if a lot of other Wim Hof instructors do this. I feel like a lot of Wim Hof instructors like have their zone and they just do stuff. Let's say I'm in Portland, they do their Portland thing and maybe travel around a little bit. But I was like a full-time traveling Wim Hof workshop person. I was flying twice a month all over the country and holding workshops. And it was a little complicated because I had to feel out where people were at. This is in the midst of a pandemic, so I wasn't teaching normally. I had to make sure that the space was adequate for everyone to feel comfortable, that we were ventilated and things like that. But ultimately it kept working out, and I just kept getting more and more messages from people that it really, really helped them. When I went on a Wisdom of the Sages retreat with to Nepal with Raghu, and or I guess it was just a Raghu retreat. It wasn't a Wisdom of the Sages retreat, but we went to Nepal all the same. And I got to just lead a couple breathing sessions there, not like a full class or anything. We're just in the Himalayas. Let's sit down over here. Let's do some breathing. And it was just kind of off the cuff. And in one of those sessions, I had two people who had full-on transcendental experiences with visions and colors and lights. And this isn't everybody's thing. It doesn't happen to everyone either. But one of those people said they saw, probably 40-something years old for the first time in their life, oh, I saw the root of my trauma, and now I'm able to start dealing with it. So just being able to be of service in that way, to be able to pass on this thing, and also like, this is what's in front of me. This is what I'm passionate about. These are the tools that I have. That's motivated me to keep going. And my connection with the students is I'm always expressing that I'm not here for business. I'm here to spread this. I don't even like calling what I do a business. I'm trying to think of something else to call an offering or something like that. Now, I do notice that when I didn't charge, people didn't take it as seriously, and I guess this is a common thing that people in various health and wellness have echoed to me or said, oh yeah, like we all know that already. But what I try to tell everyone that I teach is that I'm here because I really believe in this. I believe that this has the potential to put many aspects of health back into our own hands and give us the power. And I know that many things like this have happened before throughout modern history, where like a thing that could really work comes and it gets just squashed because it's just that we have this money system, and it's not conducive to things like this being popular. So I try to express to my students that I'm here not for money. I'm here to help, and I want to spread this. You can always write me. Keep asking me questions. The way to keep this alive is through us sharing it with each other from a grassroots level. No one's going to do it for us.
Amazing. I want to know, so Wim Hof was this main thing that you've been trained in, and then you started getting into this oxygen advantage. What is it called?
Advantage.
Oxygen advantage. So what's that, and what's the connection, or how did you start to get into this?
Yeah, they complement each other really well. On one hand, they almost look like opposites, and I think there might be some people out there who see the contradictions rather than the similarities in them. Oxygen advantage is something that was born of a method called Buteyko. And Buteyko was a doctor in Russia, I believe, in the 50s. And he sat with a lot of dying people for a project he was doing or for some research. And he was noticing the way that they were breathing towards the end of their life. And he started to be able to predict when they were going to die, like within the hour, based on their breathing patterns. And then in the 50s and the 60s, science really didn't care much, like it doesn't that much now, about what you can do on your own. And so he had been diagnosed with a fatal form of hypertension that he was given 12 months to live. And he started to notice when he breathed lighter, he felt better. And he cured himself of this hypertension. And then he started working with people with asthma. Now, I kept trying to get this into the scientific literature, and it was really, really difficult. He was being stonewalled all over the place. But at one point, he did a very large study, and 100% of the people experienced vast improvements in the conditions that they were working with. Oxygen Advantage is run by this guy, Patrick McEwen. He's in Ireland, and he had asthma himself for most of his life until I think he was probably in his 30s when he went and trained with Dr. Buteyko and noticed that his asthma went away really, really quickly. And he left his corporate job and went full on into teaching Buteyko. And then he developed the Oxygen Advantage, which was initially geared more towards increasing athletic performance and things like that. And I learned it just to know more about breathing. Well, actually, the way that I got into it, I had chronic problems with my nose, probably from the surgeries and from mouth breathing my whole life. So it's like a use it or lose it situation with the nose. I never used it. I couldn't use it. I didn't know how to breathe through my nose. I couldn't take a breath through my nose. And not that long ago, only like a year or two ago, I saw that Oxygen Advantage was claiming, hey, we can clear your nose in 5 minutes. And I thought, I've tried everything. Nothing's worked. Neti pot for months at a time. Nothing's worked. Diet, all sorts of stuff. And so I did this really simple exercise to clear my nose, and it worked. And now my nose was stuffy again later that day, but I did the exercise again. And I made a vow to myself where if this works, I'm going to give this a couple weeks. And if my nose is relatively clear, I'm signing up. So I didn't actually know that it was geared towards, let's say, athletes or whatever. I just thought if they can do this for me, I want to know about that more. So I kept doing the exercises, and it really worked. What the Oxygen Advantage is teaching people how to breathe functionally. Functionally means breathing through the nose, not the mouth. Functionally means breathing light, breathing slowly, and breathing deeply.
What do you mean with light? What is light breathing?
Not gasping, not taking very, very big breaths. We want to match our breathing needs with our metabolic needs. So an average rate of breath these days in our high stress world is something like up to 16 breaths per minute. What breath should be, the average rate of breath or breath to meet our metabolic needs, is more like 6 breaths per minute.
So we got to go from 16 to 6.
It's not that hard. It happens pretty quickly, actually. But simply by going to the nose, switching the nose, you've got like half your battle is won, because the nose is designed, the mouth is designed to eat and to talk. It's not designed to breathe. The nose is designed for breathing. It adds resistance. Your breath is naturally less when you breathe through the nose. It filters the air and warms the air. So by the time it comes to your lungs, it's the right temperature, has the right environment. And also it filters particulates out, such as viruses and things like that. It creates another barrier. So the Oxygen Advantage and Buteyko are a series of exercises to help you switch to nasal breathing and help you reduce the respiratory rate. So then, for example, if you're breathing 16 breaths per minute all the time, you're tapping into your fight or flight system like full time, and we don't want to be there. We only want to be there when we need to be there.
Mm. So did you just start? Oh, sorry, Krsna.
I just want to know, like, what is then the essential difference between like oxygen advantage and the Wim Hof method, and what's the similarity, just to get a distinction here?
Yeah. So the Wim Hof method is not functional breathing. What the Wim Hof method is, like I touched on before, 30 to 40 breaths. It's almost the opposite of functional breathing. The reason it's the opposite of functional breathing is because we're using it as a stimulus. We're using it to stimulate essentially a hormonal response. When you breathe like that, you dump a ton of CO2, and then you're able to hold your breath for a very long period of time. Now, we're not trying to hold our breath particularly for some period of time, but when you are holding your breath for a long period of time, you're very calm because you're doing this consciously and calmly, but these deep old parts of your brain don't know that you're calm. All they know is that the oxygen is not there for 2 minutes, 3 minutes, or whatever it is, and the brainstem gets activated, the adrenal axis gets activated, adrenaline's liberated in the body. When adrenaline's liberated in the body, the immune system function is ramped up, and all these other physiological things take place that turn out to be beneficial, a little stimulus. Oxygen advantage is teaching us how we breathe the other 23 and a half hours of the day, and night, sleeping and waking.
So did you
Wombo combo?
So oxygen advantage is a little bit newer for you. Are you like starting a training with that, or you said there was this 2 weeks, like if they can clear my nose issue, I'm gonna sign up. So you signed up.
Signed up. I studied it for the last year, and I've started working with people in the last 6 months or so. I've noticed that it's nice to have this toolbox that's growing. I'm not going to stop here. I'm going to keep learning more and more. But when someone comes to me, it's a weird thing. I'm sure other people in various forms of health modalities can relate to this. But I just found out a really old friend of mine is struggling with COPD. Now, my first feeling.
What's that? Sorry, I'm a little slow.
Oh, it's a pulmonary disorder. It's issues with the lungs, and so it's common right now as we're in this kind of 2 years of respiratory pandemic stuff. But he had it for other reasons. He's in Northern California, and he's been living under fires and stuff like that for a very long. And so I hear about that, and I feel, that's really, I feel really bad for him. And then the second part of me gets kind of excited when I hear about a friend or someone I know with a problem, because I think, maybe I can offer them this thing to help them. So when I'm using oxygen advantage when people have respiratory issues, generally. Respiratory issues, anxiety can help. It can help with anxiety as well. And sometimes I'm mixing these things. If I'm not teaching someone directly Wim Hof or directly oxygen advantage or a functional breathing thing, I get to mix them up. I had someone come to me recently that's more like he's in the corporate world, and he's a spiritual guy. He has had a practice for a long time. And he asked, hey, can you help me design a program that's based on breathing that will help me with my work, help me with my sadhana, and also put me in more of a warrior mindset. And so I mix these things. Like I use some advanced cold exercises that are kind of outside of the ice bath. And we use some, if we can functionally breathe all the time. The thing about that respiratory rate, going back to it, is carbon dioxide is the key to both of these things. We're dumping carbon dioxide with the Wim Hof method to elicit certain responses. And with the Buteco and oxygen advantage, we're actually building a tolerance to carbon dioxide. Our trigger to breathe isn't low oxygen. Our trigger to breathe is high CO2, right? So if you're very sensitive to carbon dioxide, that's going to make you breathe more often. Because when you stop breathing, carbon dioxide builds up, right? And so you have these baroreceptors in the brain, and every time they say, that's too much carbon, they trigger you to take a breath. So in the oxygen advantage, when you're breathing light, you're breathing less, you're getting used to higher levels of carbon dioxide in the body. Now, carbon dioxide is also the thing that can elicit fear. You know, that's the thing that makes you feel like, oh no, I need to breathe. It's connected to the amygdala. The sensors for carbon dioxide are in and around the amygdala. So part of his kind of calmness training and warrior training was, okay, let's do some exercises where we're holding the breath and we're walking and you're facing that feeling, that panicky feeling, but we're consciously relaxing into it. You know, a lot of the key to a lot of this stuff is doing things that would otherwise be really, really alarming and elicit panic on your own terms. When you get in very cold water, you know, what's the first thing that happens?
I go to the back of the wall and like have to like do one of these like double Dutch moves before I actually jump in. The mind like freaks out basically. What are you doing, bro? Stop.
Yeah, the mind freaks out, and normally there's a gasp, right?
Right.
And what that gasp is norepinephrine being released from the brain, inducing a panic response. So why is that good? Well, this is good because if we do this on our own terms, here we are, we get to face, we know we're safe, we know what we're doing and why we're doing it. We get to face that feeling of panic, that hormonal feeling of panic, and confront it and rewire how we deal with it. So then later in life, when you're not doing it on purpose and that feeling comes, whatever it is, someone cuts you off, you get some bad news, you've been there so many times and you've wired the brain to, instead of running wild, being in a very centered state.
That's why you're so grounded and present.
We got two questions that are basically the same question, which is a good question. Essentially, where do beginners start? And Govinda Madhava, he's saying here, it's a long one, but the last part, can you do too much too fast and hurt yourself? I know in the yoga, like in pranayāma system, my friend, she's like a proper yogi. Like I said, she does a minimum an hour pranayāma practice before japa. Sometimes she has pranayāma like sadhana, which can go up to 2 hours, 3 hours. And she was saying in Yoga Shastra, pranayāma is one of the only angas out of the 8 that are, you know, classically understood Ashtanga yoga. Pranayāma is one of the only ones that's compared to like a tiger that has to be tamed. And if you don't tame it properly, you can, hurt yourself. You could really do damage to yourself. So yeah, Govinda Madhava's question, and also Michelle, same question. Like, where does a beginner, how does a beginner get started with this? And can you do too much too fast?
Yeah. I'll start with the latter, actually. You can do too much too fast. The key to the Wim Hof Method, you'll hear time and time again, no force. You really have to listen to the body. So no force means, first of all, we're not breathing with a tremendous amount of force. We need to be relaxed when we do it. In our retentions, we're not trying to meet some mark. Oh, I did 2 minutes last time. I'm going to do 2 minutes and 5 seconds this time of no air in my lungs. And in the cold, same thing. I'm going to stay in for 20 minutes right now. Now, there's a time where maybe there's this very specific reason why you want to push some things. But as a beginner, it is, the key is to not force anything and to listen to the body. If you're listening to the body in these general protocols, the protocol is 30 to 40 breaths, 3 to 4 rounds. And we can explain exactly what that is in a bit. You're not going to go too far. Sometimes I go on various forums on the internet and just try to answer questions for people who are newer to this. And you'll hear that a lot. Well, I did 17 rounds and this went wrong. Yeah, that's too much. That's too much. This is, keep in mind, a stimulus. A stimulus means it's a stressor.
Right.
You don't want to overstress the body. You know, with OA, with oxygen advantage and functional breathing, again, you're listening to the body to get to the point where we're more tolerant to carbon dioxide so we can breathe less. We're doing some specific exercises that, if you feel, they're not dangerous at all. You know, if you're pregnant or maybe epileptic on both of these, Wim Hof and oxygen advantage, you might want to check with your doctor. There's some times to not do it, but they're not going to harm you. But if you start feeling panicky or something like that, you take a break, you back off.
So I just want to bring this up because there may be a contradiction in like you're saying, listen to the body, but then like a lot of this is also like not listening to the body when the body freaks out, you know. So like, how do you make that distinction?
Yeah.
Good question.
I think about that. Well, the first thing I would say is that listening to the body and listening to the mind are different. You know, the mind might tell you, let's go back to that cold water. You get in an ice bath, get out. This is bad. This is wrong. This is not good. And you really check in with the body. What's happening? Okay, my vascular system's taking over. It's shunting the veins in the extremities. Now I'm warming back up. I'm okay. I'm just fine. So there's a difference between listening to the mind and listening to the body.
Wow.
But there is some interplay there that I'm also, I mean, it's, you got listen to someone you trust, listen to yourself more than anything else, where you're playing with some of these things. You know, you can push a little bit in different directions. But the basic, we're talking about how to get started and not to do too much getting started, is follow these basic guidelines that other people who have done it for a long time have kind of put forth. And someday, did Wim Hof do the Wim Hof method? No, Wim Hof didn't do a Wim Hof method. Wim Hof just followed the feeling that felt right to him, you know? And he discovered, whoa, I'm tapping into some really powerful stuff. And then distilled this in a way that was safe and easy for beginners. So there's an important caveat here is, with the breathing. We do breathing in that method, and we do cold. We don't do them together. Because we're dumping so much CO2 and we're changing with the balance of when the trigger for when we need to breathe, passing out is possible. It doesn't happen often, but there's no problem with passing out if you're on your mat or seated somewhere comfortable. There is a problem if you're in a lake or an ice bath. So we separate those things. And what made me think of that is in the beginning, Wim came to this stuff through the cold. You know, he'd always been attracted to cold. He said when he was 12 and the other kids were out there playing, he was like studying the Gita and stuff like that. And so he'd always been interested in pranayāma and Vedic culture and things like that. And later in life, he had 4 children with a woman that he loved very much who suffered from depression. And she took her life, and he was left with 4 kids and very little money. And he just knew that he had to be there for those kids. The world wasn't going to stop for him, and that the cold made him feel good. And that's the point where he really doubled down, tripled down on that cold exposure, and was doing things like when you get in the cold again, there's that initial feeling, right? And you can do a couple things there. You can fight it, or you can go with it, right? And if you fight it, you're going to lose. You're going to feel bad and cold. If you go with it, that essentially is where the breathing method was born. And so he was doing these long breath holds, doing the breathing at the top of the water, breath hold, and sitting on the bottom of the water. We would never, ever, ever advise anyone to do that because the potential for going wrong is high. I only say that to point out that he pioneered this method, and many people who do these radical things, they push. But as a beginner, to get in touch, to get in tune, just kind of follow the protocol.
I have 2 questions. Firstly, what this is one of the most fascinating discussions we've ever had, Jai. Goodness gracious. I'm
fascinating.
I'm totally enchanted. Okay, my question. Chris, what is the utility of this realm of work or practice or technique in helping people to deal with addictions?
Oh yeah, that's good. So one of the reasons you can do 20 minutes in ice cold, or Wim, one of his world records was about 2 hours in ice up to his neck without his core temperature going down. And you can only withstand stuff like this if you have some help. And so what the cold does and the breathing, there's a lot, it's like a Venn diagram. There's a lot that overlaps. So the 3 pillars of the Wim Hof method is the breathing, the cold, and the mindset. Sometimes we call it commitment. None of that stuff's new, right? People have been talking about each one of these things for thousands of years, and they're all beneficial in and of themselves. But when you put the 3 together, there's so much overlap between them that it's just exponentially more powerful, right? And when you get
Can you say them again? I have slug mind. Just
No
say
problem.
the three things again.
breathing,
Yeah.
Cold.
gradual cold exposure,
Uh-huh.
and mindset or commitment. So the mindset comes just really by virtue of approaching these other things on a regular basis. Even having a daily routine, builds a strong mindset. But also, we're getting so many feel-good hormones, and you actually feel better in your body. That's a platform for a strong mindset. So to answer that question you just asked, though, is when you're in cold for a long period of time, you're there comfortably because you're able to access the brainstem, an area called the periaqueductal gray hemisphere. And this has been shown on brain scans, and that is where the cannabinoids and the opioids are activated in the body. So this is another thing that Wim said that I thought was complete hyperbole. He'd walk around and say, "Get high on your own supply," Like, he was being literal. Like, we're getting these really feel good hormones that build strength. And so for addiction and things like that, if you can find, to me, abstinence is important, but transference I've seen work really, really well. So abstinence, and not abstinence just by there's nothing to fill that gap. I mean, this is just my personal opinion. I'm not a counselor or drug therapist. I grew up in the Lower East Side, around a lot of people who had substance abuse problems. And we're all trying to fill a hole that you can call it, like I like to think about it, as this deviation from nature, and part of that deviation from nature, it's all the same thing. It's all spirit, we're not connected to this big hole, and people try to fill it with materialism, and it doesn't work, and people try to fill it with drugs. And so if you can fill that with something else, with this feeling of connection, and that's what I found here. All the health stuff was side benefits for me. For me, the connection was big. And you can get kind of a hit, so to speak. I don't want to turn anyone off in this community by saying that, but I mean, it feels good, and you're accessing similar places. And from a trauma point of view, I had, because of that disconnection of the heart, I had a lot of like anger issues, not in the way that most people talk about that. Not like I would get angry constantly, but I only felt comfortable when things were really intense, when I was angry. You could take me to IKEA to buy furniture and I would lose I felt like I was going to have a meltdown. But like, there's a car crash in front of me and someone needs help, and like, I know what to do. Like, then I felt very tuned in. And I realize now, being slightly more mature, that I would seek out a lot of crazy, environments and stuff like that, just so I could feel normal. Well, with this Wim Hof method, I tried so many things. I tried, retreats and meditations and plant medicines, and I had a lot of interesting experiences, but nothing really shifted this like entire lifetime of programming. How much can you shift that stuff in a weekend, let's say? Some people have luck with it. I didn't. With the Wim Hof method, every day I sat down to do my breathing, I was feeling good. I was rebalancing the hormones. And so I got to form a new baseline over time. And I think that combined with actually tapping into the source, of where one might want to just feel good. That's what people are generally trying to do when they're getting hot. It can help with addiction. The anecdotal, I like to talk about the things with this stuff that are studied, that I have the science to pull out and say, look. But I don't think the anecdotal evidence should be ignored either, because at this point, the Wim Hof method has reached millions of people by word of ear, and by practice, hundreds of thousands. And I've heard stuff that can't quite, or at least the science hasn't caught up, yet. And anecdotally, just tons and tons of people have had good success with breaking addictive cycles.
Can you share like one or two stories, just because anecdotal stuff counts for something?
Let me think what I got. Not with addiction, but one I just experienced myself. I've experienced a couple times, and I've also heard about a lot, is with accelerated wound healing. I don't know why it works, but it works. So one of my early teachers in one of my first sections of my teacher trainings for this for the Wim Hof certification, he's a Dutch guy, science teacher, and he was a white rapper. He's an interesting guy in a Wim Hof Method. Now he's doing his own thing. He wrote a book recently called Mind Lift. Casper is his name. He told a story to us, and he said when he was first doing the Wim Hof Method, or at least early on in his practice with it, he was doing one of these adventure races, and there was some horses also doing their own thing, like on the same playing field, so to speak. And he was kicked by a horse and shattered his radial bone.
Ooh.
So he started doing the breathing right away. People thought he was freaking out and hyperventilating. Goes, no, I know what I'm doing. I know what I'm doing. And he's doing the breathing and feeling all sorts of, activity in the area and the pain reducing. And then he goes to the hospital. They put on a cast. And a week or so later, I think I feel better. And took the cast off, went back to the hospital, got x-rayed, and they couldn't believe it. The bone was nearly healed. This isn't possible, but they're looking at it.
Whoa.
I've had this when I was visiting home. My dad lives in Jersey, and I was visiting for Christmas a few years back, and I do jiu-jitsu, and I went to visit a jiu-jitsu gym there, and I got my shoulder popped. I got caught in a submission. It got cranked, and I heard a pop, pop, pop. And I was pretty bummed. I love being able to do martial arts and be physical. I was like, this is going to take me out for a while. Let me see if I can use these tools and see what they do. And so, December in New York, the shower at his house, it's like a fire hydrant. And so I did my breathing, and it's almost like breathing into the area. It almost felt like the shoulder was like a lung. Like I was just directing all that energy and the blood flow right there. And then after I did that, a few rounds of that, I went to the shower and I did contrast shower, where I would do ice cold water for a minute, 2 minutes on this, and then I would switch to warm. And my idea was to get the vascular system to close and open, just to make sure blood flow was moving. And the breathing was to get inflammation down. And I didn't get an x-ray, so I don't know what the extent of the injury was. It's totally fair to be skeptical, and I feel like most people will probably think that wasn't probably a real injury, but I was better, 90% better inside of like a week and a half. In my opinion, from having done a lot of martial arts and athletics and stuff, that was like a 3-month injury.
Wow, man. Amazing. Okay. Final question. What's like the relationship between breath work and the other kind of, you could say, like classic realms of health, like diet, exercise, etc., like sleep? What is how does it all come together?
Yeah.
Maybe from your own personal experience.
Well, from my own personal and from a broader experience, everything you mentioned are extremely fundamental aspects of health, except for one of them people don't know is a fundamental aspect of health, and the breathing being one of the most fundamental and foundational. You can go without food for how long? You can go without water. You can even go without sleep for a while. It's not a good idea. You can't go without breath for but a minute, So I would say that the fact that it's overlooked is what jumps out to me. All of those things go together, and they're very, very important. But the breath is some of the most foundational stuff, and the other stuff rests on it. If you're breathing through your mouth, let's say, so we've talked so much about Wim Hof, let's switch it over for this last question to Oxygen Advantage and Buteyko. If you're breathing through your mouth during the day, guess what? You're breathing through your mouth during the night. If you're breathing your mouth the night, sleep apnea is not just a thing that people with really thick necks have. Sleep apnea is snoring is having sleep apnea. Sleep apnea, if you're sleeping with your mouth, if you're breathing through your mouth, it needs to be open to some degree, right? If it's open, the tongue is not in its proper position, and it can slide back and block the throat. If it blocks the throat in the middle of the night, you wake up. Now, we're so adaptable. We get used to it. You don't even notice, But a lot of people with any sort of apnea problem or snoring, they're waking up many, many times per hour, you know? So you're never, now the body's trying to do its hormonal thing from the moment we wake up, which is why, you know, Vedic culture recommends waking up at a certain time, and Ayurveda sleeping at a certain time. You're on this hormonal roller coaster, and it's supposed to peak and valley at very specific times.
Yeah.
In your biorhythm, right? In tune with the sun. So now in nighttime, as you're sleeping, the hormones are trying to do their thing, but you're waking up. You're waking up. And you can go in a deep sleep. So now we have our sleeps off, and you can have the best diet in the world, but if the body's not doing what it's supposed to do during sleep, how much are you going to benefit? Again, we are so adaptable. We can live this way for a really long time, but the quality of life is different. And I really do believe what Wim is constantly saying, that happy, healthy, and strong, that's for everybody. That's not something that's just for a small select group of people. We are all built to be that way. We've just deviated so far from what's normal.
Yeah.
These are some simple ways to get back.
Comfort is violence to the soul.
Beautiful.
My last question is, you can talk a little bit about what you're trying to start or have started, your Sovereign Souls, maybe business model. My, I guess, question is also just, how might someone get in touch with you? Maybe take one of your workshops, or, you know,
Yeah.
I'm definitely going to reach out, because I could use a little Buteco or Oxygen Advantage. I've been having a chronic, I didn't grow up with asthma, but I have a chronic breathing problem that usually happens at least one time a year for a few days, sometimes twice. Usually if there's a major change in altitude, and I get really scared, because I started using a, what do you call it, like a breathalyzer, where my chest just closes up. And I remember one year when I was living in the ashram, it got so bad, I legitimately thought I was about to die. Like, it got so bad, I didn't have a breathalyzer near me. So I'm definitely going to reach out to you personally, because I'm interested in breathing through just throughout this conversation, I've been like, am I breathing through my nose?
Yeah, me too.
I've been super mental now.
That's where it all starts. Just that awareness. That's a great place to start.
Yeah, and it looks like Govindamata was saying, yeah, I'm interested in learning more. I'm definitely interested in learning more. I mean, this sounds superhuman, or this word is used by Nietzsche, I think, Ubermensch. I'm like, this sounds like some Ubermensch stuff that I'm all for it. And I'll be personally reaching out, but how might someone get in touch with you, get in touch with this Sovereign Soul thing that you're doing? Like, you can speak about that. We can end there.
Yeah, sure. Well, what I'm trying to do is just pass on the message of these people through my own unique filter and experiences. But I'm just trying to help people and make sure, like I said before, that we keep this stuff alive at a grassroots level, because this is for the people. You know, this is not something, once you learn these principles, they're yours. You don't need me. You don't need Wim Hof.
Yeah.
And so that's a slow climb, you know, to mainstream. But even so, it's happening. It's happening right now. So that's all I'm trying to do, is I'm trying to help people use the breath and understand what kind of tool or what kind of tools it can be. And I just had a very nice devotee help me make a website recently. It's Sovereign Souls, spelled SOVRN, souls, SOULS.com. It's just basic right now. It's got my contact on there. And so you can reach out to me there. I'm doing workshops. I'm going to stay for the rest of the year, probably in the Oregon, California area. I've had enough traveling for this year. I'm doing one-on-ones via Zoom. In which, you know, I'll take intake of what's going on, what your goals are, and we can talk about writing a program tailored to you. And also I'm going to be doing group courses where instead of one workshop, which is usually, you know, a day long, few hours, we can take, let's say, Wim Hof Method or Oxygen Advantage and unpack them over the course of 4 to 6 weeks. So little bite-sized bits, take the practice home and try it on for a while, and come back and let's touch base and really build it. That's one thing. The workshop's a great immersive experience. I love the energy of having 25, 30 people in a room, everyone supporting each other in the ice bath, breathing together. There's something about breathing together. Again, the science isn't there yet, but the experience is palpable. It's much deeper when you're doing it in a group. The bigger the group, the more intense it tends to be. However, when you learn something one day, it's hard to come away and go, you get a taste for it, That's like the seed.
Yeah.
So I want to do like longer format stuff. So yeah, just reach out to me there. I've been not a social media guy for many years. I tend to kind of not put myself out there, but I'm putting myself out there because I really believe in this and I want to connect with people.
So there's also, I just found Instagram, Sovereign Souls Breathwork, at Sovereign Souls Breathwork, yeah?
Yes. That's
Okay. Okay.
Bro,
Chris.
fascinating.
Man. Yeah.
really grateful that you agreed to this. Really grateful to have, this is the longest conversation, of course, we've had. And but although we've connected earlier and realized, through Instagram, and we're totally like-minded, this has been educational for me and kind of inspiring, even. Not kind of, actually inspiring.
Yeah, man.
Oh, thank you so much. I
fully echo that.
Well, I would love to at some point take you guys through.
We usually. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. I was lagging a little. Anyway, I think we're good here. Yeah. Do we have something else to say?
Yeah. But he was gonna say, you were about to say something, Chris.
Oh, at some other point in time, I'll take both of you guys through some breathing, just so you can experience what the Wim Hof method is.
Definitely.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Alrighty. Okay, we'll end the broadcast. Jai, anything we need to tell the people?
Not this week. Next week we have a special guest friend. He's a closer friend of mine from Chicago, pre-med student, powerlifter. So continuing on with this sort of health theme that we're doing for the last for at least a month. We're literally in the last 10 days of our 1-year commitment to this podcasting, because our first sort of motivation was like, can we maintain this for a whole year? A lot of podcasts have come and gone in this pandemic time. It's very hard to stay committed. We've like, okay, let's try it 1 year, 52 episodes. Let's see if we could do it. And we're at 10 episodes in the countdown. So kind of excited about that, honestly. And we're gonna
man. Gosh.
My computer just muted for some reason. Anyway, so looking forward to that. Join us for next week with the powerlifter. I think it's going to be super cool. The different choices.
Yeah, and Chris has got something to teach all of us guys. Like, it's just so self-evidently true that, like, if you have like a human body, then you should know this. All right. Thank you, Chris. Hare Krishna, everyone. I'm going to end the broadcast.